Welcome to lecture for crisis intervention. We'll be talking about telephone and online crisis counseling, which I'll refer to generally as distance intervention for crisis counseling. So first, let's talk about some advantages of distance intervention. So doing crisis counseling over the phone, so kind of hotline type stuff, or possibly online, chat room, email, that sort of thing. One of the big advantages is in terms of attracting clients that might not otherwise seek services. And one of the reasons it's an attractive option for some clients is because of the anonymity that's involved, right? Sometimes it's easier to seek help if you're anonymous because there's less fear of being stigmatized for your help seeking. Right? So if somebody sees me going to a clinic, they might think something's wrong with me, right? And people are maybe afraid of that. Or if anything that they need help with involves kind of strong, shameful feelings, and that they're ashamed about talking about it, not only not wanting to be seen by people going to seek help, they may not want the person they're talking to know who they are because they're ashamed of the things they're talking about. And so if they can interact with somebody and not have to give their full name or even their real name, it might make it easier to seek that help. They also have obviously greater control over the interaction, right? So maybe a more attractive option because if they get uncomfortable, they can just hang up. And some people that this may be really attractive for people that score higher on measures of social phobia, right? So if they have this kind of profound fears of being negatively evaluated by others, well, do they have this easy out? Okay, I can do this. I can call this number. I can get on the computer and talk to this person. And if I think they're judging me, I can leave, and I won't feel bad about leaving. Because if you really have kind of a social phobia, you wouldn't say, "Oh, I can go in person and leave," because then if I leave, they're going to judge me for leaving. Right? So you have greater control over the interaction, and then also you can attract and reach people that are in more isolated communities, right? Clients who might not otherwise be able to get services because of their geographical location. And there are also other factors that can lead to isolating people. Even if somebody in a large urban environment, think, well, they're in an urban environment, there's clinics all around, they may not be able to access those clinics for a variety of social, political, and economic reasons. And therefore, these kind of distance interventions open up some options. And again, not everybody has a computer, but most people have access to a phone. Not everybody, but a substantial majority of individuals. Another group of advantages we're talking about, it's effective. And some of the reasons it can be effective because if it has substantial immediacy, right? Sometimes timing is very important in crisis intervention, obviously, and early intervention is usually better intervention. So if I can call somebody and talk to somebody right now, rather than I need to talk to somebody and now I've got to get myself in a car and get across town, and hopefully somebody will have time to see me at this walk-in clinic. Right now, I'll be waiting in the waiting room. Maybe I won't be able to make it across town. Maybe my crisis is such that I'm so disabled by it that I can't pay attention, and I can't safely get from where I am to where the help is. Right. So, with distance intervention, you can get immediate help as soon as you're ready to pick up the phone, log on the computer. It seems that there's the potential for decreased dependency issues. Obviously, it's more difficult to develop pathological dependency with someone that you're not face to face with. It's possible you can still develop a pathological dependency, but it's harder to be dependent on somebody if they're not there in the room with you. It's easier for you as a counselor to avoid encouraging and creating those dependencies when you're on the phone or online than when you're in the room and you maybe are more overwhelmed by their need and pull for kind of feelings of sympathy from you. Another reason why that may contribute to the effectiveness of distance intervention would be worker anonymity. So not only are the clients anonymous, but the workers, as a rule, are anonymous as well. It frees the worker to do some things that they may not otherwise be comfortable doing. But it also has advantages for the client in terms of if they can't see us and don't know what we look like, that might be a good thing, because sometimes our own physical characteristics can get in the way of therapy. We might remind the client of someone they knew, and if they're a trauma victim, maybe the person that assaulted them, maybe we look like the attacker, and that can be really difficult for them to work through and get help from somebody who reminds them physically of this other person, right? But over the phone or online, they can picture whoever they need to picture, right? So if it's comforting and helpful for them to picture a grandfatherly figure talking to them, or a motherly figure, they can kind of project onto us. We become this blank slate that they can project onto any kind of therapeutic image they need, and that could be potentially helpful in fostering a therapeutic relationship and making them feel safe enough to talk about the things they need to talk about. And it's also efficient intervention in terms of cost effectiveness, relatively inexpensive compared to a brick and mortar building where you're having to pay overhead and all these things. You can house a lot more therapists in a call center than you can in a counseling center where you need a good sized room for each therapy office. So cheaper to provide the services, and also usually free to clients. Then you also have the opportunity to offer multiple services. You can really maximize the use of specialists, right? So volunteers typically do kind of the heavy lifting. They do most of the interaction. But you could have one psychologist and or psychiatrist on staff working with 20 volunteers who are answering the phones, and then that one professional can help supervise and help with the difficult clients that maybe need some special intervention. And it's much easier to do that in a kind of a call center setting than in a clinic. Okay. So despite these advantages, there are obviously some disadvantages as well. In terms of what you get from the client, you get less data. Right, you're not able to read any of their body language, or see the affect in their face. You're limited to what they say and how they say it. So you really have to pay a lot more attention to the content of their speech, and also the tone and the speed and the frequency and all those things. Right? And you're missing a lot of data that we take for granted usually in our face-to-face interactions. But when you're working with a client and you see them, you're learning a lot of stuff, even if you aren't cognizant that you are learning that and picking up on those visual cues. But again, with distance intervention, unless you've got some sort of webcam thing, which is rare, you don't have those visual cues. Similarly, there are few responses that you can give to the client, right? So now, your own body language and your visual cues, you can't give those to the client. You may still do them, but the client can't sense them, perceive them. It won't have an impact on them, which means that what you say and how you say it becomes much more important and influential in the content of what you say, and the tone and the pace and the pitch and the volume of your voice. You have to work harder to make all of those things therapeutic. And then if you're obviously doing distance intervention on the computer that's just chat or email, you even lose the voice stuff, right, in terms of data from the client and responses from you, and it's all about content. And it takes some skill to word things in a way that the message can be clearly communicated and not misunderstood when you have stripped away all the nonverbal information, all the intonation stuff that helps convey meaning. When you strip that away, when you're typing in a chat message or an email, you've got to be really able to write well and clearly, to communicate clearly and not be misunderstood. And then the last disadvantage I want to touch on is the issue of termination. And again, it's kind of advantage, disadvantage. From the client's point of view, they can hang up anytime. From a therapeutic point of view, they can hang up anytime. And if you're seeing someone and they get up to leave, I'm done with this. This is stupid. I'm out of here. You can usually have time to say a few more things and possibly keep them in the room as they're walking toward the door. Right? And then you can also take steps to ensure their safety if you think that they're unsafe. If they're over the phone, online, you may not have that ability, right? Which can be very stressful for workers because it's more difficult to ensure client safety when they have that power to cut you off at any time. Okay, now let's talk about applying the Gillen and James 6-step model we've talked about before, using distance intervention, how it may look a little different. And one thing, before we talk about the 6 steps, the first, so before the first step, you have to establish psychological contact, right? And that's because some of the unique challenges presented by doing crisis intervention over the phone or online. And psychological contact means that the worker attempts to establish as quickly as possible a non-judgmental, caring, accepting, and empathic relationship with the client that will give the worker credibility and elicit the client's trust. So if you don't quickly establish this contact, it's going to be harder to keep them on the line long enough to help them. And if you try to bull ahead and do some other stuff that you need to do, get some certain information, start making plans, but you don't have that connection, they can hang up, they can disconnect. So really important to make that psychological contact, do some rapport building. Right, that's your first goal. Right? And there's a variety of ways to do that, obviously. You might use calming techniques. Right? So if they call and they're clearly in distress from just the way they're talking, you might offer some techniques, breathing techniques, guided imagery, what have you, to help calm them down. So now you've given them something, and they're feeling better, and that's establishing this connection between the two of you. Obviously, making empathic responses. And you have to work really hard to make empathic responses when you can't read their face. And so it's going to be a little more guesswork, maybe even, on your part. And so you really want to make your responses tentative. It seems like and then you make some statement. And some of it you base on how you imagine somebody would be feeling who's calling in to a crisis hotline, right? And then also simply waiting, right, and letting them know that you can wait, that I'm here for you, and I've got time. I'm not just this isn't tech support where hello, can I help you with your problem? Oh, you can't tell me right now. Okay, I can take this caller. Bye. Right? No, this is somebody who's going to be caring and empathic and here for you, and trying to get that message across as quickly as possible. Okay. So once you've done that, you can move forward in the model, right? Which first step is defining the problem, right? Which obviously you want to use open-ended questions, responding with empathy as they're answering. I think, like I said, it's harder to get a sense of their emotions without the visual cues that you would have in face-to-face. But then again, because they can't see you, it frees you up to use more resources yourself to maybe make this a more manageable task in terms of how can I respond in the best way. You can have little reminders for yourself to help you deal with the difficulty of not having the visual information. James talks about a couple things I thought were interesting. One, having a reference list of feeling words, right? So when you're trying to make a pattern, it sounds like you're feeling okay, and it kind of just primes you, and you don't have to scan the list for the words. But maybe look over the list from time to time, and it'll prime those words in your mind so that they'll be easier to retrieve when you're trying to just talk to somebody about how they're feeling. And then maybe having a list of standard questions that you could check off to make sure you've covered all the areas, things you typically would need to ask about. Which I thought that was interesting. I thought that's a good discussion question. So the discussion question for this this week is, what would your list be? So if you had a standard list of questions, if you were working at a call center, and you had to have, and I won't make it a billion, I'll limit it to 10 questions. There's 10 questions you're going to ask everybody who calls in to make sure you cover key information. What would your 10 questions be? Okay, so that'll be your discussion question for this week. And then the other strategy James talks about is having a notepad, obviously, which you can jot down pertinent things related to the crisis that they're talking about, coping mechanisms, and doing your assessment stuff. When you're doing face-to-face stuff, sometimes it's difficult to take notes because it can, if they see you taking notes, it breaks or can break that connection, the tenuous connection between you and the client. But if you're on the phone, they can't see you taking notes, and so go ahead and take advantage of it and take notes to help keep you on track, make sure you don't miss important stuff. Okay, so you define the problem, where you help the client define the problem. You want to define it in their terms. And obviously, you want to ensure client safety, which here important to use closed-ended questions and be very direct. Often people are afraid that they're going to, give the client the idea of killing themselves. If I ask about it directly, they may not have thought about it. Now they'll think about it. Now they'll do it. It'll be my fault. No, they've thought about it. Everybody's thought about it. Ask directly. Are you thinking about killing yourself? Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Right? And if the risk, based on the questions you ask to determine their risk, if the risk is high, be very directive and assertive. And you want to continue doing assessment stuff. Is somebody else there that knows that they're actively suicidal, and where are they? Which, the where are they is a question you don't have to ask when they're face to face, obviously. But if you think there's a high risk of self-harm, trying to figure out where they are is important. But you have to be careful because, again, they may think, "Oh, I'm not going to tell you," or you're going to try to find out where I am. I'm hanging up. So that can be a tricky situation. But again, you want to try to keep the client safe and don't be afraid to ask direct questions. So be direct and assertive. The third step in the model is to provide support. So obviously you can provide referral information, and this is something, again, where it might be easier doing this over the phone because you can have the computer in front of you, be typing, pulling stuff up. Okay, there's this thing we have, and we have this. You can have manuals out with phone numbers, right, that are tabbed. Okay, when people have this kind of problem, I'm going to flip to this page. Right. So the setting helps in terms of providing that kind of support. And then also, largely the support you give will come from, listening and being patient. All those basic skills we've talked about before, where you're trying to get across that you want to be very clear that you're there for them, and you want them to see you as a source of support to help get them stable, back to equilibrium and functioning in a safe way. Okay. When examining alternatives, you want to be slow and systematic, maybe even more so than when you're face-to-face, because it's harder to be sure that they're with you, right, in the kind of examining alternatives, and that it's harder to gauge if they have if they have a quizzical look on their face, we're talking about something, you can't see that over the phone. So you could be a bit slower, a bit more systematic, and then check to see, frequently check to see if they are understanding the ideas that you're talking about. You know what I mean about that? And is that possible for you? What would get in the way of this? You're checking for impediments to different alternatives. Then you also want to be aware of the delusion of fixed alternatives, right? And this is refers to the assumption that workers sometimes have that there must be an answer, right, or the answer. And if I can't think of the answer, well, then I need to just pass this client off to somebody else. If it were that easy there was an answer for every situation, then we could just probably write some software programming, some software, and have computers that would provide people with answers. So people would put in, okay, here's my problem, and computers would say, okay, well, here's what you should do. But that's not how it works. And even so, you have to work to find solutions, and there probably isn't a solution or the solution. And the other thing, and this is important, it's as much about the process of working toward a solution as it is about finding a great solution. So you may have two therapists working with identical clients, right? And therapist 1, therapist 2, and therapist 1 comes up with the perfect solution. Okay, all these resources are exactly what this person needs to do. They need to engage in these coping skills, and that would be perfect if they did that. And the other therapist doesn't come up with as good a solution. But therapist 2, the client working with therapist 2, might have a better outcome than therapist 1. Because it's not all about the solution. It's about the process of coming up with a solution. So using all those basic skills and being empathic and being sensitive to a person's needs, that matters as much as coming up with an answer. So, crisis intervention in therapy isn't just about problem solving, right? If it were, we would have just behavioral engineers. But we don't have behavioral engineers. We have therapists and counselors, people who are good at being with people. So I say all this to not get caught up on finding the answer, that there is one solution. you're working to find a solution, but it's really important about doing it in a therapeutic way. Okay. Then obviously the next step is making plans. So you want to encourage them to choose the best plan from among alternatives. So as much as possible, we want to keep them having as much autonomy as they're able to have, depending on their level of impairment, right? And then you want to practice the steps in the plan. So you're going to call your mom and you're going to ask about this. Let's go over what that might sound like. Okay, and so you can role play. What would you say when she answers the phone? Hey, mom, and then you role play the part of the mom, and you can you take steps to make sure that the plan is something that they're capable of doing. So you kind of practical considerations, and that it's a workable, doable, practical plan. In line with that is the last step, which is obtaining commitment, right? So you want to confirm the plan, because again, we're not face-to-face, really important to make sure we're on the same page. So get them to repeat back to you the essential features of the plan, double check again for any concerns. And the plan is not getting them to commit to some complicated set of behaviors over the next 6 months, right? It's in the next few minutes or hours, what are a few simple steps that they're going to take. So keep it simple, short term, and you're more likely to get a valid commitment to something like that, rather than I'm going to try to be better. Well, what does that mean, right? So what are you going to do specifically? So very specific, simple, and short term. In terms of challenging behaviors that you could encounter doing distance intervention, might be things like questioning your competence or your credentials. Can you really help me with this? Manipulation, trying to get things out of you, asking you about your own personal life. People that are just really angry and kind of mean to you and maybe berate you over phone, which again is one of the things that comes with anonymity. When people have anonymity, they tend to be less inhibited, and when they're less inhibited, sometimes they're meaner. And then another challenging behavior would be when they're just silent. They don't say anything. For all of these challenging behaviors, and there are different ways to respond to different ones. And there's not a right way, but there's lots of different ways to respond to things. But in order to respond well to whichever of these behaviors you're encountering, the key is keeping the challenging behaviors in context. Right? So thinking about them the right way is what I mean by this. And in the right way, my opinion, would be to realize that behavior is purposeful. So when they're trying to manipulate you, if they're being angry and seeming mean, if they're not talking, there's a reason. Right? They're doing it for a reason. And you need to be thinking about, why are they doing this now with me? Right? It's not because it's easy to make and dismiss kind of characterological attributions. Oh, this college is just an asshole, right? But those aren't likely to be very helpful in working with somebody. So try to think, what's the function? What's the purpose of this behavior? And often, not always, but often, challenging behaviors are clients' way of dealing with anxiety, right? Their fear and their uncertainty. And rather than reacting to the overt content of the behavior, try to react to the latent or hidden purpose of the behavior. So if they're questioning your competence, rather than reacting to that question, either just telling them exactly what your credentials are or getting defensive, think about why would they be doing that? And then you can react with something like, sounds like you're concerned about whether it's safe to trust me with the thing you're struggling with, right? So go beneath the surface of the challenging behavior. If they're attacking you, sounds like you're really angry, and right now you're trying to see what I'm going to do if you call me certain names, and I'm wondering what it is you want me to do, and then giving the room to talk about it. Similarly, behavior is communication. All behavior is communication. It sends messages, many of which we fail to pick up on, some of which, or maybe many of which, the sender may not even be aware that they're sending. So when they're doing something, they're communicating information to you, and they may not even be aware that they are communicating a message. Right? But if you can see challenging behaviors as a client's awkward and maybe developmentally inappropriate way of trying to communicate something to you, it can be easier to respond in a therapeutic manner. Okay, so they're doing this and they're trying to tell me something. Well, and they say, "I think you're just stupid." They're not really trying to tell me I'm stupid. What is it they are trying to tell me? What's the message behind this behavior? Okay. And then the last thing to keep in mind is that what you see and hear when interacting with somebody in a short period of time is a sample of their population of behaviors. They act all kinds of different ways in all kinds of different settings, and all you're getting is a snippet. And it's a biased sample, right? They're calling because they're in crisis, right? You're likely to be interacting with people when being polite, kind of considerate, isn't at the top of their list. So if they're acting a certain way, it may or may not be how they are. You can't be sure. And it can make it easier again to be therapeutic if you don't say, okay, oh, this person is such a da-da-da. This is how this person is being now. And they may not always be that way. They may need to be that way now for some reason, and they're trying to communicate something to me, and it's my job to figure out what that is and respond in a therapeutic way. So challenging behaviors can happen with a variety of clients. But what about severely disturbed clients? Those that are experiencing, maybe psychotic symptoms, dissociation. It's a little different. So some techniques to think about there with this group would be to emphasize focus to reduce problematic affect. So if they're kind of over emotional and all over the place, push them to focus. Get them to focus on concrete here and now stimuli. Right? You want them to orient to person, place, and time. Okay. In using your words to direct them. Okay, can you feel the phone against your ear? Can you hear the sound of my voice? Okay, you feel like you're on Mars. Look outside the window. Do you see the sun? Do you feel the warmth from the sun on the window pane? So orienting them to all those kind of here and now sensations can help them feel less out of control. That's one strategy. You want to not join in their psychotic thinking. Right? You might acknowledge that they have a belief, maybe a delusional belief or a hallucination, but you don't say that you agree it's true. Right? And if you think, well, I'll just kind of agree for a little bit to go along with them, to keep them on the phone, if you aren't honest with them, that you don't really hear or see the things or believe that they're being stalked, eventually you're going to get burned because at some point, you won't keep following them down the rabbit hole. And they'll say, okay, well, if you know the CIA is being bugged, then you need to meet me at the coffee shop at da-da-da-da. Well, no, I can't do that. Oh, okay. Well, so you're clearly with them. Right? So you need to say from the beginning, okay, I don't think that's true. I understand that right now you believe that, and that's very disturbing. I don't believe the CIA is listening to this call. I don't think there's an alien outside your bedroom, right? Because if you agree with them at any one point in time, then they think you're on their side, and you share their belief, and then eventually they're going to push you to a point where you can't possibly continue to agree with them, and then they'll think, okay, this person is out to get me, and they were lying to me, and I can't trust them, right? And you've destroyed the therapeutic relationship, any kind of connection you might have had. So don't join in psychotic thinking. Don't agree with them, but you also don't want to berate them for their thinking. Okay, I understand you feel that way right now. You're thinking this. I understand that. But you don't have to agree that it's true. Another important thing typically is to assess for medication use with these clients, because when people are experiencing psychosis, typically there's somebody who was previously on medication and they're probably off of their medication. So restoring medication use is often an important step in stabilizing them and kind of stabilizing the crisis. And it's okay here to empathize with their antipathy for side effects. I understand how taking that medicine is really a drag, and it makes your stomach hurt, and you can't sleep, and that sucks. But right now, when you're not taking that medication, you're experiencing some things that are even more distressing, I would say, than having your stomach hurt, and that's why you're calling me. And so you may have to call your doctor, get back on some medication, and to eventually find one that has fewer side effects, doesn't make your stomach hurt, it doesn't mess up your sleep, but will keep you from feeling this way. Because right now, this is really upsetting, having these thoughts and these experiences. Right? Obviously, we don't have realistic expectations. You're not going to cure these folks over the phone or in a chat room. You want to get them stable enough to get into some more intense help, probably involving a medical professional. You always important to assess lethality, but especially important here, and it may be a challenge is if they have really kind of tangential, disjointed thinking. So you really have to stay very focused and be very direct in your questions, and you have to repeat questions to get enough information to assess the degree of danger that they present to themselves or someone else. And then the last thing is, after working with and while working with individuals who are severely disturbed, get supervision. It can be a really difficult experience, and don't try to handle it on your own. Think, oh well, if I can't do this myself, then I don't deserve to be a counselor. I should be good enough to do this. Nobody is good enough to work with every client all the time and not be bothered by it. So get supervision during, if you need it, and certainly afterward, at least consultation, and talk about it, because it can really shake you up. A couple of other issues just to kind of touch on regarding distance intervention. Some people might be regular callers, regular users of a distance intervention program, and they might call crisis lines or log on to these chat rooms regularly, not because they're in crisis and need help now, but for some other reason. Usually the reason's related to loneliness or social isolation. And with these folks, it's important to set firm limits, but also see this as an opportunity to be an agent of change. So this is somebody who's seeking a therapeutic experience, and we don't want to punish them for that, even though we can't let them tie up a phone line or chat room for 3 hours at a time, because it's designed for people who are in crisis, but they are looking for help. So you can provide that help within some firm limits. Unfortunately, some clients will call in and want to talk dirty and just kind of be sexually explicit, and simplest strategy here is to transfer them to a male worker. Usually fixes that, because most people that do this, and kind of like most people with paraphilia, sexual disorder, like voyeurism, pedophilia, those things, 90-something% of those people are heterosexual men. And so it will no longer be gratifying to them if you have them talk to a male worker, and they may be less likely to call back. For abusive clients that are really kind of like cussing you out and saying horrible things, you want to set limits. We don't allow that kind of language in this setting. I understand you're angry, so try to empathize, but you can't use those words. If you can't find other words to use, you're going to have to call back when you can. And the other thing you can do, obviously, here is transfer them to, let me transfer you to so-and-so, and you transfer them to your supervisor, and they'll terminate the call and set the limits. But the key here is just not responding back with anger. And not so much because you're going to hurt this abusive person by yelling at them, because you're probably not. But you'll probably feel guilty later and think, oh my God, I yelled at them and they were calling in for help. I know they were an asshole, but I shouldn't yell at them. So I say don't respond with anger, not so much because you'll hurt them, but because you'll feel guilty about it afterward. In terms of behaviors that make you uncomfortable, often clients will call hotlines or use distance interventions to discuss things that they're ashamed of. So the things that they're talking about very well may be topics that make you uncomfortable as well. Right? If talking about their sexual practices or fetishes, that can be uncomfortable to talk about with someone. Right? So it's important to know yourself and what things make you uneasy. And then to get more comfortable talking about a wide variety of topics and things that make you comfortable, you need to seek knowledge. So learn more about those experiences. And I don't mean go to a fetish club. read the research, read the textbooks about it, and what people are going through that are struggling with those issues, and seek supervision. Talk to somebody who has knowledge and is comfortable talking about those issues, and you'll eventually feel more comfortable talking about those things. Because usually our discomfort is based on kind of this fear related to ignorance or lack of knowledge. It feels creepy, and I don't know why people do this. I don't know what that is or what it means, and so it makes me feel uncomfortable. So if you have more knowledge, often those feelings of discomfort are less pronounced. The last thing, there are multiple unresolved ethical issues related to distance intervention, using hotlines and chat rooms and emails, in terms of what's the liability on the part of the care providers if someone does hurt themselves or others. Not clear. What if privacy or confidentiality are violated by some third party? And we often worry about this in terms of computer interventions. If somebody hacks into the information, because anything we put on the internet, out in the ether space, is potentially accessible by somebody with enough skills and motivation to try to get that information. So how much confidentiality can we guarantee, and who's responsible if we don't guarantee it? So there are certainly some unresolved ethical and legal issues that will probably be explored more fully in the coming years, especially as people explore more and more the use of the internet in delivering psychological services at a distance. Okay, so remind the discussion question. James recommends you have a list of standard questions in front of you when doing distance work that you can use to make sure you're asking about all the areas typically pertinent to the problem. What would your list be? So what are the 10 questions you would have to remind you, okay, I need to sure and ask about this, and this. Okay. That's all for now. Take care.